So I actually wanted to ask Ghosty a question based off of her opening statement.
Mhm.
Some of your descriptions for toxic masculinity, I felt lent themselves to general human traits as a whole. For example, you use the example of cheating and wanting to know somebody's location on their phone. Is that something that's solely a masculine trait, or do women exhibit those same behaviors as well?
No, it's not solely masculine. So I added on that if a guy is doing this for the reason of like to prove his manhood or because he so like if a guy is cheating on women, that doesn't necessarily mean it's like toxic masculinity, but once he's doing it because he's like, well, I'm a man and this is just what men do and I'm allowed to do this because I'm a man, that would be toxic masculinity. But and same with the possessiveness. If a guy feels like he has to be possessive over his woman because he doesn't he feels like I'm the man, I can't have other like she can't hang out with other guys or have like guy friends or
Yeah, but do
he
women
would
exhibit those same traits?
yeah, and they they could be seen that could be done under toxic femininity too.
So it's not predominantly a male thing, right?
It's not only men, no.
Okay, so but in the context in which you were using it in your opening statement, it was a part of what you would consider toxic masculinity to be.
If he's doing it to like prove his masculinity or display his manlyhood or something like that, yeah.
Do you believe that men as a whole are toxic?
No, no.
Okay. Do you feel safe when you walk down the street?
Um I mean I'm kind of like a more of like a careless person. I've been in like a lot of situations, so I just don't really care as much. Usually I feel safe there. Sometimes I don't feel safe depending on the situation, but I do feel safer with a guy with me. Yeah.
Okay, because sometimes I feel that when people are describing traits of what quote unquote toxic masculinity, there's a lot of things that get lost in the shuffle. You're basically saying that this is inherent in who they are and their personalities, but yeah, sure, men might be quicker to violence than women, but women also have their own traits. For example, their innuendo, reputation, destruction. These are things how they can exhibit them being upset at somebody. They might key your car instead of
Hmm.
cheating on you, or they might cheat back on you for revenge as well. So I just feel like lumping those traits together, I think of it more as toxic people rather than toxic masculinity, because there are people that are inherently toxic, but to kind of put it all in the category of men, I just think doesn't really seem to be realistic.
Well, I did say there is toxic femininity too, but I think what makes it either toxic masculinity or toxic femininity is when they're doing it based on like their gender. So they're doing it to like as a display of their like manliness or to be seen as more of a man or to prove their manhood in like that sort of sense. If you're doing these things because it's like I'm a man or I'm a woman, so this is what I can get away with or something kind of thing like that, or a more inherent trait to a certain gender, and then using those traits in a toxic way, that's what I would categorize as toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. But of course, there's toxic just like human behavior. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think I'm open to like a conversation about whether or not like toxic masculinity is like a productive term for what's being identified. But I think at the core that's being argued is like the things that are being identified by this phrase by like scholars who write about this stuff. Like these are like real things
What scholars?
that are being examined. I mean, we could look at the APA. I mean, if you want like specific names,
so it's an argument ad populum. Can you logically demonstrate
sure.
it?
I mean, you can call it that, but again, like whatever your issues are with.
I'll tell you what. I'll make it empirical. Hang on, I'll make it empirical then.
Whatever your issues are with the research, all I'm saying is there are people identifying these things, and if we agree they exist, they're just not exclusive to men. That's fine. I don't mind that.
No, I'm not sure that the nature of of them being toxic, which would be bad, right? Toxic would be bad, right? Yeah, so that's my dispute.
I think part of the definition.
Yeah, that's my dispute. I don't think that these behaviors are bad, Ryan. So no, we actually don't just disagree on the semantics. We disagree on whether or not the toxic, which would be bad, that these are even bad behaviors. So let's start with this.
Do you think sexual assault is bad?
Oh my God, dude. Okay, I'll tell you what. Are you sexually assaulting?
Sexual assault is bad?
It depends on how you define it.
Are you going to answer the question? Do you think sexual assault is bad? You don't need me to define sexual assault.
Well, do you know why I need you to? I'll explain why.
Because you're thinking I'm loading in like some
no, I'm not. I'm not even thinking it's loaded. Let me just explain myself. A woman told me.
Then maybe like
a woman told me, a Marxist feminist told me, if my wife woke me up with a blowjob, that was sexual assault. Ryan, is that sexual assault?
I would not identify that as sexual assault.
Do you understand why I would want you to define and tell me what you mean by that term?
I'd be surprised. I'm surprised that you think I would think that's sexual assault. So it's
it doesn't matter what you're surprised about.
That you would understand.
Is that good rationality for me to ask you how you would define the term, so that I make sure that I know what I'm agreeing to or not agreeing to?
Yeah, I think it is fair.
You can imagine the worst case scenario.
Unconsensual sexual.
My wife waking me up with a blowjob. That would be unconsensual, right?
See, this do you think that sexual assault is a real thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know what you mean by it.
So
I don't know what you mean by it.
I think in a man and wife situation.
Give me examples of what you mean by it, and then I can answer your question, Ryan.
I'm asking by your own standard, by your own definition, even.
Okay, so you want my definition of sexual assault?
I'm just asking. You don't have to give it. I'm just saying, by your definition, would you say that some sexual assault is bad at least?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Okay. Do you think there's any manifestations of sexual assault that are related to men viewing women as or viewing feeling entitled to women?
Sure.
Okay, I would say that's toxic masculinity.
That's nice. I would say that it's sexual assault. Based on
based
on an individualistic category, but what would qualify that as toxic masculinity and not just sexual assault?
Because it's related. This is what Ghosty's been getting at. It's related to their perception of themselves and their manhood, and their manhood being viewing that in relation to women, and then they're feeling entitled to that woman's body to the point where they assault her. And it's not very complicated logic, to be honest.
I see. So when you're saying toxic masculinity, it's when a man does anything bad, which is also in relation to any masculine qualities that you assign to him.
More so that it. Can you say that again? I don't know if I agree with the exact framing, but just repeat it for me.
Many masculine characteristics or qualities that you assign to a man, and then they do bad thing, and those qualities are some way in there for bad things that they do.
If those things are driving them, if they're like manhood is like the thing that they feel entitles them to that person, I would say that is, yeah, that's the example of what people identify as toxic masculinity, which again you seem to say could be completely redefined as social carnage. I'm not sure if it works in that context exactly, but
and Ryan, what is the actual prompt for the debate? Can you tell me?
Is toxic masculinity real?
Yeah. Brian, can I ask you, are gender roles real?
Are they real things that manifest in society? Yes.
Well, are they real though?
And probably have some biological core to a lot of them. Yeah.
Okay. That seems completely fair to me. So gender roles to you are real, and they manifest somewhat from innate biology, right? Is that right?
That's what we just walked through. Yeah.
I'm just clarifying. I'm trying to be as good faith as possible. Ryan, do you want to abolish gender roles?
Sure. I want to abolish the imposition of gender roles. I don't care about people expressing their gender. I like my gender. I like feeling masculine myself.
So if something can be changed, it's just a social construct, right? Like gender.
I mean, I don't think like social construct means infinitely malleable. I don't think those are what. Yeah.
What else could it mean? It's construction of the mind. If you can change
money's a social construct, but it still has.
And you can change it.
Yeah, but based
you change
on
its value
not by
constantly.
yourself. Like I can't decide that a $1 bill is worth $100. You know, or anything like.
You could if you were by yourself.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so it's a social construction. So I just got to ask you this then, Ryan. If it is the case that gender itself is something that you want to abolish, right? And you don't think that is masculinity?
No, again, I said the imposition. The imposition.
Of okay. So, is masculinity gendered?
Yes.
It is gendered.
Do you think I want to abolish masculinity?
No. I'm just asking if can women be masculine? Biological women be masculine?
Of course. Yeah.
So can biological women engage in toxic masculinity?
Yeah, sure.
They can.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me how a woman could engage in toxic masculinity, please. I mean, a biological woman.
Well, I mean, there's kind of two angles to it. The first could be that she's viewing, like, I would say that her relationship to like the men around her, like encouraging them to view their masculinity in a particular way that is harmful to her and other people around him. And then also it could be, I mean, I guess when you said biological woman, I assume you also would include like trans men there, and that their perspective of being a man I mean, like trans men express toxic masculinity as well, for sure. So that, I mean,
so women and men can both be toxically masculine.
They can both contribute to toxic masculinity, no doubt.
Both of them can be toxically masculine.
Yeah, I mean, what you would call biological women and I would call trans man is what I'm, because it's related to the identity, their like identity of being a man is like the thing that we're talking about is driving them to exhibit some behavior, right?
So like, I innately feel like I'm a man, and I'd be viewed as less of a man if I was a trans man if I didn't like essay this chick. That would be.
I mean, that's a very reductive way to put it, but I guess you can say that.
Okay, got it. So I just got to ask, isn't it the case then that all you're actually doing is you're just assigning any bad behavior? Like, what would bad behaviors be that a man?
Not just any bad behavior.
But hang on. I just want to distinguish this. What bad behaviors could there be that men could exhibit that would have nothing to do with them being men? I
think most of the things that we've discussed, like if they're not manifesting because of their relationship with their own masculinity, then that would be not necessarily.
How could you know that though? Like, I would say that you could not divide masculinity from man because it's part of man's ontology. So isn't every bad behavior a man engages in also going to be a masculine behavior because it's a man doing it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, can you? I don't know how that follows then. I can't not be man, right? There's no way for me to not be.
You can do whatever you want to be, Andrew.
But there's no way for me to not be male, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then the fact that I'm a male and I do something bad, how do I disassociate thing male, which also governs behavior of me, from thing? How do I even do that?
It's about whether or not you're trying to manifest your perception of that manhood in an action.
That would be every action I took.
Okay. Well,
wouldn't that be every action everybody takes? Would have to be a manifestation of them, their physiology, their mentality based on physiology as well, would manifest into all behaviors everybody took.
I think it's about your mindset. So.
Now it's about mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was like it's been like part of the goal the whole time.
Was it?
Maybe I can offer a translation. I don't think that translated well. So Ryan, for instance, he's using a some not all argument. So basically, like, all apples can be fruits, but not all fruits will be apples, right? So what he's saying is like, if you're saying toxic masculinity, then you're saying all men are toxic, because it's the some not all. If that helps.
But we're not saying that, right? Like, I mean, Ghosty, go ahead.
Neither of us.
Here's why I'm trying to make the disassociation. I'm trying to like untangle this mess because it's a fucking mess. If a guy, I think I can understand from your perspective when you say a guy feels like his manhood's threatened, so he has to essay some chick. That's an example of toxic masculinity, right? That would be correct.
Yeah. Yes.
What if a guy just has really high adrenaline and the guy grabs his woman's ass and he knocks him out? Is that toxic masculinity?
Not necessarily.
That's probably just toxic behavior.
Is that action good though?
No, it's toxic behavior, but it's not coming from toxic masculinity, I guess.
Okay, but the reason you would expect that a man would do that before a woman would, right?
I mean, honestly, I know a lot of women who assault men pretty often. And
I don't know.
Actually,
if you like God a lot.
I would say that's toxic femininity because women feel like they can get away with that. And
what was the point of bringing up SA earlier then?
Yeah, I don't.
We're not attributing it primarily to men.
Yeah.
I didn't attribute it.
No, you didn't. Ryan brought it up, so I guess I'm asking Ryan.
Sure.
You asked
I was saying
in SA, right?
Yeah, and I was just saying that in relation to like when men feel entitled to a woman's body because they're a man, like that's, again, it comes back to that because they're viewing it through the lens of their masculinity specifically.
Okay, so because they feel entitled, You're considering it as, all right, you're considering it essay if a man feels entitled to a woman's body and he actually does something about it, right? Am I getting that correct?
Wait, can you say? I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I feel
All
like
right, you're saying that it's essay if a man feels entitled to a woman's body and he, actually does something about it rather than just keeping it in his own thoughts, right?
I mean, it would be if he against her will, and it's like, yeah. I mean,
Okay,
it feels like you're removing something from it when you said
no. I'm asking for clarification. I'm just trying to get what you actually said. And all right, if you flip the coin on the other side, right? If a woman tries to essay a man because she feels entitled to him, and if he doesn't reciprocate, she'll call him gay or whatever the case may be, which is usually what happens. Would you consider that her being toxic or it just being a crappy human being?
Yeah, I think we've just, yeah, go ahead.
I would say that's toxic femininity. That's an example of toxic femininity.
Okay, but if,
like, and not only that, but she's leveraging his toxic masculinity, like, or his perspective. I don't want to be gay, like that, like she's leveraging that by being toxic and through her femininity to make him do stuff he doesn't.
Yeah,
want to
I'm
do,
still confused. I'm actually still
calling
confused
a guy
about
gay
this
because he doesn't want
though.
to sleep with you is weaponizing his masculinity in there. And
Yeah, I get
doing
that. I
as a
think
woman
I
herself.
understand the distinction and why you have to say there's toxic femininity because you don't want to hold a dual standard here. But I actually still don't really
think it's real.
Yeah, but I still don't really understand it because it seems to me like any bad action which would be associated with maleness could easily fit into this category of toxic masculinity.
It's about motive. The motive is what you're missing, I think.
Yeah, but not really, because couldn't my motive necessarily change just by my sex not being male?
What do you mean by that?
Meaning that if I was born a female, maybe I wouldn't knock the guy out who I knocked out.
Okay.
So wouldn't that be associated with the fact that I'm a man to begin with?
You think no, because not all guys.
Well, I don't know how you
people out.
Yeah, I think that the attribution though of everything everybody does is tied into physiology. It's tied into how your brain operates, how your body operates, the various chemicals which are always pumping through them. I could easily make the counter case that a man who goes and robs a bank because he just has a lot of really high testosterone, for instance,
so
right?
You're making a deterministic argument.
We were able to correlate
it.
We were able to correlate it, right? Well, no, I'm doing an internal critique. What does that have to do with my view? So anyway, why couldn't you easily just as soon attribute every action from a man who had too much testosterone, for instance, robbing a bank? Why is that not toxic masculinity? You say it's because there's a motive which determines it. But it's like, but it's maleness itself, which could have led to the motive itself. Like if he didn't have that high of a testosterone, he never would have committed X crime. That seems to be a masculine trait, and it seems to be tied to, and it seems to be tied to his maleness. So if that's the case, why is that not toxic masculinity? I still don't actually get that.
Because it doesn't have to be tied to your maleness. It could also be tied to how much money you have or some circumstance you're in or something like that. It doesn't have to be tied to your gender. But if you tie it to your gender, if you're like, oh, well, I'm allowed to get away with bad behavior because I'm a man, that's what men do. Like, this is just what guys do. Boys will be boys kind of thing. Then that is an example of toxic masculinity. If you're doing
but I don't know. Yeah, but again,
over and over this whole time.
Yeah, I understand that you keep making the distinction, but it doesn't make sense to me because it just seems like all of this would just tie back to, again, physiology, behavioral patterns between men and women. I just tie any bad behavior which a man does over a woman that's more common as being toxic masculinity, and that would fit the criteria for what you consider toxic masculinity to be. And I'll read it to you so that you know I'm correct about this. Here is what your definition was that you gave me. The definition was, quote, this is why I always take notes, by the way, behaviors or traits which are masculine used in an unhealthy way. Okay, but when we're talking about behaviors or traits which are used in an unhealthy way, I would consider all of those to be tied to things like sex to begin with, right? Otherwise, how are you determining what's masculine or feminine to begin with? They're associated by your own admission to sex. So if that's the case, if you're tying masculinity in this definition to sex itself, and then you claim anything which is a negative, that's definitionally true. I'll read you the definition again, Ryan.
No, I understand. I think what's happening is
definition.
this is a manifestation of your inability or unwillingness, really is a more apt term for it. Unwillingness to engage with like what gender identity is and how that's different from biological sex. Like you can't separate.
You
these
just said
to your
Brian,
worldview,
I'm
right?
using your definition.
But I think what we're distinguishing is your internal view of your masculinity and how that relates to the action. Like I guess, like Neo, can you?
That's not what the definition. Can I read? Can I read the?
Can I ask your debate partner? He hasn't talked very much.
I know, but I just want to get this cleared up, and then you can talk.
Gentlemen,
I'd like to talk to you after this if you want.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from him.
But I want to finish.
Go ahead and let Andrew finish reading the definition, and then Ryan, you're welcome to inquire with Neo.
It's behaviors or traits which are masculine used in an unhealthy way. That is extraordinarily vague. And I feel like I could basically categorize any fucking thing that a man does that is bad into that. So, for instance, a behavior or trait which is masculine. Well, this is going to be societally determined. Yeah. What is masculine?
I thought you were done after you read the definition. Or are we?
No, I'm not done with the inquiry yet. Stop trying to fucking divert. I'd like to finish the inquiry. Maybe Ghosty can do it because you're spurging too much, Ryan. But anyway,
behaviors or traits that are inherently masculine used in a toxic, unhealthy, or negative way.
Yeah, what is a trait that's inherently masculine?
So things like, I will say, I feel like guys have a more, like a higher sex drive. They have more testosterone, which makes them more. They do have higher tendencies for being aggressive, and killing and stuff like that. And
so wait a second.
Like two examples.
So wait a second. So to get this right, men have higher testosterone and they kill more. Those would be things which are inherently masculine. So that if a man kills somebody, that's toxic masculinity.
Again, you're missing the motive. So
the definition doesn't say shit about motive. It says inherently masculine. That's your definition. Hers.
Yeah. So and
whose
then
definition
after
should
that,
I use but hers, bro?
After that, it says being used. So being like used. So,
being used.
That's like the motive. So if you're using these inherent masculine traits in a toxic way,
and an inherent masculine trait for you would be testosterone. That's what you just said.
Well, testosterone can cause traits that are inherently masculine, right?
Well, okay. Well, then what's an inherently masculine trait?
I just gave you two examples.
So testosterone was one, right?
I gave you aggression and hypersexuality.
Aggression is a masculine trait?
I'd say that it's not to say that women can't be aggressive, but I would say that men are more likely to be aggressive or show.
So anytime a man,
testosterone,
so then by your definition, then anytime a man is aggressive, right? That is toxic masculinity. It has to be definitionally.
If he's doing it to prove his.
Show me in your definition where it says that.
Okay, maybe I didn't write the definition perfectly. I wrote it today. If you want me to add on, I mean, I came further in my opening statement. I said, remember, in order for these behaviors or tendencies to fit toxic masculinity category, they need to be done by a man specifically because he believes his behavior is connected to his manhood in some way. So
yeah,
he's doing it.
And my first definition
was actually acting on toxic or unhealthy behaviors to prove or display masculinity.
Yeah, so what you did, here's what you did, and this is what I predicted in my opening statement. In order to make this definitionally true, you added qualifiers to your own definition that you gave me because that was the only, so I can do the same thing, okay? Toxic masculinity is any man that's missing a tooth. That's a man who's toxically masculine. Prove me wrong.
That's fine. I don't think I can. But so Neo Starling, I'm curious.
Stop. Ryan, I'm talking to.
Actually, I don't need to. I don't need to stop.
Can I finish? Can I finish the inquiry? Ryan,
you're not my king.
Ryan, can I finish the inquiry? We're right at the end. We're right at the end, Ryan. I just want my last question answered, Ryan. That's it. Ghosty, can you prove me wrong?
I'm taking a break from you.
Every man who's missing a tooth is toxically masculine. Can you prove that wrong?
Well, what's your definition? You would have to give me.
I just gave it to you. Every man who's missing a tooth is toxically. That's what toxic masculinity is.
Yeah. If you define it that way, then yeah, sure, that's fine. So Neo, do you
Can you let her answer? Ryan,
go ahead,
stop talking, fucking Ryan. Let her finish.
Sorry, go
So-
ahead and answer the question about a tooth and
Your
masculinity.
Yeah.
definition is that toxic masculinity is men who don't have teeth,
Men who are missing a tooth.
men who are missing a tooth.
Can you prove me wrong?
That would mean it exists, though, right? If you define it that way.
I don't think it has to do with toxicity, so it just doesn't really compute.
What do you mean it doesn't have to do with toxicity? That's weird.
Missing a tooth.
Yeah, but I think that, it rubs me the wrong way when men are missing a tooth. And so I think that that's inherently toxic because it affects me negatively.
Okay, I also gave my definition for toxic in this context. I said I'm using it to describe something that is detrimental, damaging, or hurtful to oneself or others.
Yeah, that's true. And that definition can stand on its own fine until you use your other definition, which explains what toxic masculinity means, which is not the same as the word toxic. So in this case, why can't I just make a semantic distinction and come up with the same type of proprietary definition you are? And then you would have to just concede, well, I can't prove that wrong, right? So this is why it's important for us to get the semantics out of the way. I was trying to do that in the beginning, but for some reason, Ryan thinks that talking about semantics is a trap, even though it's the only way you can have discourse.
I don't think
Right?
that.
What we should do is we should have unpacked the semantics to begin with, so we could look at your definition. Because when I just looked at your definition, you added a bunch of proprietary shit to it post definition to make it true. And it's like, you can just do that with anything, though. Do you understand that now? You can do that with anything and then say, because that's how I proprietarily define it, therefore it's true, debate over. It's like, no, that's not how it works. I need to know what your proof is that these behaviors are toxic and come from the inherent masculine features of a man. That's what I need to know.
Okay, so there are I can list some authors who write about toxic masculinity, right? Like E.H. Thompson, I believe is one, a Springer. These are, and when they talk about it, they use definitions that describe things that men actions that men take on behalf of what they feel they should do as men. And so this is again, the core of what we've been discerning, which is why I'm just curious. I want to ask Neo, if you'll let me, Andrew, if you'll give me permission to ask your debate partner a question.
I told you when I was done with my inquiry.
That's cool. Are you now, or are we doing another one?
Yeah, we were done.
What's up, Ryan?
Okay.
Why do you think you've been spurging for the last 5 minutes? No one's interrupted you.
It's all yours.
I'm just curious. Do you recognize the distinction that we're making between something that just a man does that's bad, or them doing an action because they view that that's how men are supposed to act?
I mean, you'd have to look at it societally, because men inherently, okay, if we're to use the example of men having more testosterone in their bodies than women, right? And because of that, they're more sexually aggressive, or whatever the case may be. That is something that's inherent to us. But what was I going to say? Testosterone is also utilized, to build muscle, to build drive within another human being, to drive us to do the things that we do. So even though you might look at that as a negative trait at times, women and men alike both attribute these same characteristics when it comes to trying to mate a partner. If a woman is hitting on a man, for example, and he's not down. Again, I used the example earlier about him being treated as a homosexual because of that. And a man might, maybe had a few drinks in the system, or he probably got his pride hurt, and he felt that, hey, you know what, this isn't good. I'm gonna do what I got to do. Those I would attribute to just people being crappy human beings as a whole. That's what. All right.
Sure.
What the whole idea of toxic masculinity.
Can you elaborate on that? The pride comment, how it hurt his pride. Can you elaborate on that part of it?
Well, pride is also not just a masculine trait. It's a human being trait.
Sorry.
You know what I mean? We all have pride.
Sure.
Your feelings can get hurt, and you felt that something was unjustified, whether it had to do with talking to another human being, or you failed a test. You probably thought you could have scored a higher grade, but you didn't. These things are traits of people as a whole. It doesn't matter whether you are a man or a woman in this particular situation. So the idea that
agree.
yeah, oh yeah, no. So all right. Let me ask you a question. If your boy comes up to you, right? He's a man. He's not a woman. He doesn't identify as anything other than a man, right? And he comes up to you and he says, "Hey, you know what? I bought this new shirt today, man. How does it look on me, right?" And you think, in your heart of hearts, it looks horrible. It was one size too short. His belly is sticking out of the sides, and You tell him, hey man, that shirt looks crappy on you. You need to lose a couple of pounds so that you can fit in that shirt properly. Do you think you're being toxic when you are telling him that, or do you think you're just expressing a truth to him so that you don't hurt his feelings?
I mean, I guess it depends. I'm not
I don't
sure.
think that's toxic. I mean, and again,
Yeah.
it depends like how you say it, I guess. Like if you're just being an asshole about it.
No,
but if
no,
you're,
no.
like,
I mean,
being
I mean,
It
honest-
probably depends on your
this is-
relationship with that person a lot.
I mean, this is your
I got
boy.
friends I
You've
would
known
say
him
that to, and friends I
forever,
wouldn't, right?
and this is just how you talk to your friends, right?
yeah, then that's
Okay,
not
then, yeah.
toxic. No.
Okay, now if you flip the shoe on the other foot and a woman brought a dress and it didn't fit her, and you know her homegirls were like, "Hey, girl, that looks great on you. You know, go out to the club and do your thing." Do you think the women in that case did a service to their friend by telling them that it looks great, even though they knew it didn't look good on them, or because they worded it in a certain way, now it's justified? So which one was toxic?
Wait,
I
neither.
mean, they could both be toxic in different ways, right? But sorry, go ahead.
Okay, but is that inherently a trait of men just being mean? Because men talk to each other this way. You know, this
so
is
do
Sure,
so
I
do
agree,
women.
yeah.
That's kind of the silly thing, though. Like our
is
we
it
do the
silly?
same thing.
If you really stop and
Yes.
think about it, is it silly? Because we're talking about traits that are inherent to us that make us treat people a certain way.
Mhm.
Well, can I push it back up? Because actually, it's not necessarily that. Like, what we're saying is the perception. If you perceive a certain trait, if you're engaging in an action because you think it's inherent to men, you think men are supposed to do that, and that trait is also like being considered toxic. That's where we're identifying it. It's about your relationship to the view of masculinity, right? Or in femininity, like because women are supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Like, but not all women do that thing and not all men do that thing, so it's not inherently male to do either of those things. It's just we're identifying you doing those things in the context of feeling like that's what men are supposed to do.
So like
Yeah,
an
but
example close to this of toxic femininity would be like a bunch of girls who don't like another girl, and she's like, "Hey, do you like my shirt?" And they're all trying to fuck with her because they're like, "Oh yeah, it looks great on you. You should totally go out in that." And they know it looks horrible. That's, I think, would be a toxic feminine trait. I could see that because they're using women's attractiveness and beauty against them, which is more of a feminine trait. Like women use attractiveness and looks that they have a higher value, I guess, in society. So that would be like a toxic feminine trait. But for my like experience, most girlfriends who are actually close to each other, if your girl puts on something ugly, you're like, no, you're not wearing that. Like, let's find you something better.
Yeah,
Right?
but again, I don't really consider that toxic femininity. I just consider that you just not being a very nice person. You get what I'm saying? Like the idea that you're
it's
inherently
attributed. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say the idea that you're inherently toxic just because of whatever chromosomes your body seems to possess, and because societally, you were told that you're supposed to be a certain way, and if not, you're going to be a bad human being. I don't really believe in that. I just think that there are people that are okay human beings, and there are those that are crappy. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you fall under. We're two sides of the same coin.
But nobody's saying you're inherently toxic because you're masculine or because you're feminine. It's using inherent masculine or feminine traits in a negative way.
What
Yeah,
about
but why
domestic
shouldn't we just because these traits are all shared between the sexes, all of them, the propensity for all whatever you would consider to be masculine traits and whatever you would consider, otherwise you wouldn't be trans advocates. So you would have to equalize them. You'd have to say both sexes have the propensity for these traits equally across the board, right? At least some propensity for them. Now you could say based on sex, you have higher testosterone, you have this. I agree with all that. But if it is the case, why shouldn't we just individualize it and just say, that's toxic behavior and leave masculinity and femininity out of it completely? Why should we accept this definition instead of a much more useful and broad category of this behavior itself is bad, regardless of who's engaging in it? And what does that have to do with the masculine or the feminine? By your worldview, actually, that would be a much better definition.
I agree, but again, it's because of the motive. So if people are doing something to prove their manliness or to prove because it's like a feminine
yeah, but why use the
trait or
loaded
whatever.
term? Why can't we just say that's bad, don't do it? Why should we accept that that's toxic masculinity, or this term of toxic masculinity, because you add it as a proprietary definition,
Well, I think
rather than us just rejecting that and saying that there's some universal behaviors which are preferable from people, and this isn't one of them. Why should we ascribe this as a behavior at all? Tell me what the case use here is, why it's so useful, why we should utilize this over his definition, which is you're just a shitty person, or you just did a bad thing as a person. Why should we put these loaded terms in the ethos? Well, exactly.
To be clear, I'm certainly not asserting that like you have to embrace this term. I don't expect you to start using the term toxic masculinity, Andrew. All I'm saying is that like people do use this term.
That's not my question, bro.
Describe.
That's not what we're talking about.
To describe the thing that we're talking about here, and like
you're not even engaging with what I'm saying.
We're identifying, and that they're identifying is a real thing, and we seem to. I think we all agree it is a real thing.
I don't think we all agree. We're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah, it seems like you don't want to actually talk about it.
We're not talking about the same thing. We're talking past each other. All I've been doing is trying to bring the clarity. Go ahead, Ghost. Maybe you can bring clarity.
Because ideally, in my ideal world, where there is like less like genderization, I don't know if that's a word, but the less like breaking everything down into like gendered boxes, I think it would be an ideal world where we could just say that's a toxic trait, blah, 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 blah. But in today's world, we do genderize things. So there are lots of people who act a certain way because they have these old, I don't know the word for it. They have these old thoughts in their head that's like, I'm supposed to behave this way because I am a man. I'm supposed to behave this way because I am a woman. And some of these traits can be toxic and unhealthy and hurt themselves and hurt other people. So because we live in this world today, if people are perpetuating these actions and just deeming them masculine or feminine, and then they're acting toxically or unhealthily,
but that makes
badly.
But that makes my point for me. So if you want to live in a world where you think that there's less gender allocation for things,
I want to live in that world, but we don't right now.
But okay, yeah, I get it descriptively, but you want to, so we ought to live in that world. So descriptively, if that's the world you want to live in, I would think you would be trying to reduce loaded terms. Like you would agree with me that this term has been hijacked by feminists for all sorts of other proprietary definitions other than your proprietary definition, right?
Sure, by radical feminists, sure.
And tons of people use it in tons of different ways and very loaded ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. So the thing is like, if that is the case and you want to move towards a world where that's not the case, why the fuck would you advocate its use? Why would you advocate its use instead of advocating against its use?
I'm addressing reality. I'm addressing that there are people who act in bad ways because they think their gender entitles them to act this way.
Yes, but there's no reason for us to put the term masculinity, especially by your definition, which is inherent masculinity, inherent masculine traits, whatever those are. You say you name two, one's testosterone, this and that. It's so broad that you can encompass so many behaviors in it. It's so subjective, those behaviors you can encompass into it. I would think if you would want to move to a gender-free society, you would want to remove those things to begin with. It doesn't make any sense why you want to keep using the loaded terms.
I would think since you don't want to move to a genderless society, that you would be on our side and you would be wanting to use this term.
Why?
Because for exactly the same reason. You don't want a genderless society,
I don't
right?
believe that the things that you consider... So you gave some extreme examples of what you consider to be toxic masculinity, for instance, right? You say a man, essays a woman based on some perceived
he needs
idea.
To prove his manhood. He needs to fuck women.
Why don't you give me?
Feel like he's a man.
Hang on. So now we have the most extreme. Yeah. So now we have the most extreme. Give me the least. Got it. Give me the least extreme. What's the least extreme version of toxic masculinity?
Let me see.
I mean, could be being very domineering in a conversation because you think that you need to demonstrate your masculinity through performative conversational cruelty.
Yeah, or I think even like the
Ryan, were you just trying to say that I was being mean to you?
I'm saying I'm talking about a thing that I do also. I mean, but yes, I'm pointing to you. But yeah, I mean, I also engage in. I'm also not saying that I never.
I'm sorry that you engage in those. Sorry, you engage in those behaviors.
Like I have a relationship with my own.
I was asking Ghosty. She seems to be reasonable and willing to engage and not Spurg. But anyway, Ghosty, go ahead.
I don't think it's spurting.
Were you
Sorry, I'm
done,
trying to
Ryan?
let the woman speak, Ryan.
Very
Were
good.
you
You're
done?
being very toxically masculine right now, Ryan. Go ahead.
Okay, let her
Go
talk
ahead.
now.
So yeah, like hazing is an example. Men and somebody wrote this in my chat. Men in groups trying to like do stupid things to like one up each other, or like I one time I went on like a motorbike with a guy and I like told him, I was like, please do not fucking speed. It's not gonna impress me. Like I don't think it's cool. Like please don't kill me. Like don't. And he starts like going crazy, going like 120 miles per hour. Like I'm like on like it was fucking scary. Like guys
I
do
get it.
these things to try
So
to impress
because
people,
it's
to
their
be more, to be seen as more of a man or whatever. And I think that's
okay.
toxic.
So I just want to make sure I can break this down very quickly. So if your motivation is to engage in like one-upping the other men who are around you, especially through the idea of hazing and in-group preference and things like that, that would be toxic masculinity.
To be, if they're doing it to be seen as like more
Yeah.
of a man.
Yeah. Like team sports.
No, I don't think team sports are toxic in
What
any
if
way.
what if your whole point of you wanting to score more points and haze the people who are around you and things like this is because it's perceived by everybody as being
Well,
more
if
manly.
if you're playing a sport and that makes you
Mhm.
feel more like a man, that's not, playing sports isn't toxic. So therefore it's just not toxic.
Yeah, but they're
behavior.
Yeah, but you realize that they haze each other consistently and constantly in team sports.
Well,
and it's
hazing
part
is
of the
different.
culture.
Hazing is different than playing a sport, right?
No, but as part of male camaraderie and building relationships with men, hazing is a necessary part of being in groups. It happens everywhere.
Necessary.
Yeah, it's
I
necessary.
think if you want to use football as an example, men are
Well,
tackling each other all day long.
well,
They
hey-
also smack each other's butts, which I believe was used as an example earlier. So I
Well,
think if
no,
you wanted to,
some examples of hazing might be getting way too drunk, right? That could be that's a pretty bad thing, right? Examples of hazing might be to kind of ritualistically make up a horrible nickname for a person and call them that often, right? Hazing examples might be, I don't know, you got to jog until you throw up, right? There's all sorts of hazing which happens. And yes, it is a necessary condition inside of male packs. We haze each other constantly and consistently in every work environment I've ever been, at least in the blue collar world, that is the case. And by the way, this is not only normal and regular, but I would consider it to be a good masculine trait. It's part of, do you know why we do that? It's to test out the shit that doesn't belong in the group. You're shit, you don't belong in our group, go away. You're shit, you don't belong in our group, go away. You're shit, you don't belong in our group, go away. That's what the whole purpose of hazing rituals are. So I don't consider that toxic.
So
Why would that be
what-
toxic? That
give some
seems like it's the opposite of
examples.
toxic.
Give some examples. Do you think there can be toxic? Do you think there can be hazing that goes too far that isn't good?
Sure.
Okay, so that would be
Why would
toxic
that be
hazing, right?
masculinity, though? Well, when you say toxic, do you just mean the word bad?
Again, so what did I say? It's behavior that is detrimental, damaging, or hurtful to oneself or
So
others.
bad? Is that bad? You just
Sure,
mean bad?
we can conclude it as bad.
Yeah. So I would just say there's all kinds of behavior that I would engage with and say that that's bad. You can do bad things when you're hazing people, but that wouldn't mean that hazing wasn't necessary for in-group preference, because some people can do bad things, right? I would say it's still not an example of toxic masculinity, even though you would say it is.
So there can be appropriate hazing.
Tell me
Sure.
what is appropriate hazing?
I don't know, like, I guess.
Can I be super fucking mean to another guy and call him a bunch of names and give him a horrible nickname and talk a bunch of shit to him and run down his self-esteem?
If you guys are like joking around, you guys are friends, and this is like what you do.
That's not
like,
hazing. You're not friends with them yet. This is part of the ritual to become part of the in-group. That's what you do.
It could be toxic.
Right.
Yeah,
You think it could? I think,
can be. So again,
yeah, it
like,
can
this is-
be. It's so vague. Like
It I mean, it
you're
is
just
because
yeah, go ahead.
we can't have like super fine lines for like all of these things. Like the behavior is not definitive for like every single person. Like it can go any different
So
way. There's
it
not like a
seems-
fine line.
Quantitative, you know.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to me then that this has much in the way of case use, this version of toxic masculinity. If even behaviors that I point out that I would think you would consider toxic, you're like, well, it can be based on some ascribed
you do
motivation
it.
that we can't demonstrate. Well, I think
Well,
all of
it's
that
that we're
would be
talking about
based
two
around
components.
masculinity.
We're talking about an interplay
Okay.
between two components, right?
Okay,
The
what are
perception of
the-
one's masculinity or femininity. Talk about toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. I'm sorry, and we're talking about the relationship between one's own gender view as well as the behavior itself, and whether or not that behavior itself is harmful for their, I would say, harmful for their goals. Like if you're in a situation and your goals are hindered by you engaging in this behavior, then we could consider that harmful, I guess.
Wait, what if the behavior is an immutable characteristic?
Like what, for example?
Manspreading. Why do guys manspread on the train?
I don't think that people were actually upset about manspreading as much.
No,
as,
well, no, that's
people thought they were,
often.
but sure, yeah, like I don't think
that's
that's
not
really
to
a
be just
problem.
utilized
Yeah.
for toxic masculinity. I've heard it many times, but can you answer that? So that's an immutable characteristics. We have testicles, right? And when we sit
Sure.
down, sometimes we got to sit a little spread apart so that we don't crush them and we can let them breathe. Some people consider that to be a toxic male behavior, but it's really just an immutable characteristic that men have that we can't really help. So how do you explain those type of situations?
I don't know that I'd call manspreading as like toxic masculinity, unless you're spreading your legs like way more than you need to, and you're saying like, well, I can do this.
Who
I'm a man,
determines?
whatever.
Yeah, who
But,
determines who needs it?
If
Yeah,
you're
like, who
doing
well,
it
I
to
mean,
make
if
somebody
you're-
uncomfortable or something,
Yeah.
like I feel like
There's
in
not a-
most
Yeah,
situations,
what if you were doing it to make
it's
somebody
not-
uncomfortable? That still doesn't seem like it would fit the criteria for your definition. That you're using something
It's like,
inherently
again,
masculine here.
two parts. Like, are you doing? It's like, well, if do you feel entitled to spread your legs as far as you can because, like, oh man, I can sit wherever I want, like, or is it just like I'm just gonna do it and I don't give a shit? Like, I mean, it could be different things, right? The motive is part of the it's a component.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that what you're doing is, again, what you're doing, and leftists do this constantly. What you're doing is you're taking a definition for subgroup of behavior, giving it a proprietary loaded definition, right? And then what you say in order to prove its existence is you say, based on this proprietary definition, it's just definitionally true. And it's like, but Ryan, that's why I came up with the example to explain to you that I can do this as well. I can just say this is definitionally what toxic masculinity is X, right? And you would have to agree to it as long as I loaded the proprietary definition with whatever the behavior was. We don't consider this to be toxic masculinity. What Neo Starling is saying is he's like, I think it's better actually to group these as categories of just this is bad behavior or not bad behavior based on social standards. But to use the loaded term of toxic masculinity, or to even say that it's real or always bad, is probably not the best way to characterize these things. You're using a loaded term in order to just kind of make it and giving a loaded definition to make it proprietarily true. My proprietary definition true because it applies to these things. That's what makes it true. And it's like, but you can do that with anything. Like I could call it LaFlippadoo. I could say it's LaFlippadoo. And you would have to be like, well, yep, that's LaFlippadoo. It just would be definitionally true. And so it's like, that doesn't really serve a use here.